Namaskar. When Swami Vivekananda was speaking on dharmic principles and sounding the death knell of all fanaticism in the Parliament of World Religions in 1893, there was another eminent Indian scholar in attendance, whom Swami Vivekananda himself admired, Veerchand Raghavji Gandhi, who was representing the Jains at the Parliament. The words that made the American newspaper Buffalo Carrier say, of all the Eastern scholars, it was this youth whose lectures on Jain faith and conduct was listened to with the greatest of interest and attention, were premised on an ancient way of life that has richly added to the broader dharmic fold in India and beyond, Jainism. Besides being among the most well-educated and prosperous communities in India today, Jains have dedicatedly stood firm on Bhagawan Mahavir's push for non-violence, truth, and non-attachment for spiritual liberation over millennia, even in the face of immense persecution. Today on Mahavir Jayanti, to discuss this and more, we have the privilege of having with us Jain Samani, Dr. Chaitanya Pragya, a senior disciple of Acharya Sri Mahashramani ji, the 11th Acharya of the Jain Shwetambar Terapanthi tradition. Dr. Pragya was initiated by His Holiness Acharya Mahapragya ji in the benign presence of Acharya Tulsi ji in 1986. She is a professor in the Jain Vishwa Bharati Institute and has been working in the Florida International University in the United States for promoting Jain studies and research in the Western academia. She is the founding director of the Bhagawan Mahavir International Research Center and has organized many national and international conferences on Jain philosophy in India and abroad. She has published more than 5 books and more than 35 research papers in various reputed journals. Her research interest includes Jainology and comparative philosophy and religion. I would like to welcome you, Dr. Pragya.
Thank you.
So to begin with, I wanted to ask you about the premise on which we base Jain thought. Particularly, what do you think Bhagawan Mahavir brought forth that was fundamentally novel and reinforced or went against the dharmic way of life and thinking as it stood at that point? Because Bhagawan Mahavir and his philosophy emerged in the milieu of a certain Indic and dharmic legacy and tradition. So please tell us a little about the life and teachings of Bhagawan Mahavir in this context.
So it is a very great opportunity for me to have such an enlightened environment of interview about Jainism. See, Lord Mahavir comes in the long tradition of Jain Tirthankars. According to Jainism, in each epoch, in each time cycle, there are 24 Tirthankars, religious founders of Jainism. And among the 24, the last Tirthankar is Lord Mahavir. He taught the same kind of religion which was taught by all preceding 23 Tirthankars. So his purpose was not to raise voice against any tradition or any cultural issues, but he was teaching the same kind of religion which is full of spirituality, non-violence, detachment, and you can say non-absolutism, and also focused on final liberation of soul. He taught especially he emphasized on 3 main principles which are into practice till today in all Jain community, that is non-violence, non-possession, and non-absolutism. These are very unique in the sense that though non-violence is taught by all religions, so it is not new to Jainism only, but what Jainism has said about non-violence is really very fascinating, very important from ecological point of view also, and from spiritual point of view also. So Jainism has gone very deep into non-violence, and it has taught that the life of all different types of species and living beings and human beings is very important to maintain even the ecological order, ecological balance. And for a spiritual purpose also, we have to be very much non-violent in our behavior, in our thinking, in our attitude and also in our all actions. So to extreme level, the concept of non-violence has reached in Jain tradition or is followed in Jain tradition. So that is the main important thing which we have to learn. Most of the religions talks about religion or non-violence, but they mostly think that human beings or fellow beings should not be killed, but they don't think about the animals, they don't think about the natural resources, that they are also having life and they should also be not violated unnecessarily. So that is the great thing which we have to learn from this concept of ahimsa, which taught especially by Mahavir and all Jain Tirthankars in the long tradition of Jainism. And second is non-attachment. Mahavir said that the main cause of violence is possession. So how you can be more and more detached to the material world, material things, material comforts, pleasures, whatever is necessary, we can use, but it doesn't mean we have to be attached to them. So that is the main thing which we have to understand, that because of attachment, we are going into violence. Either we are attached to the position, either we are attached to the property, either we are attached to some name and fame or cultural dogmas, etc. So we have to be very much clear that if we are following religion in true sense, then we have to be more and more non-violent rather than to be attached to anything. So that is detachment, and it also has brought cultural understanding, mutual understanding, and what we say tolerance in Jain practices. Next is non-absolutism. It is very, very important principle, how we can live with peace with the people of other ideologies, other cultures, other dogmas, or other practices. So it teaches that how we can be more tolerant and how we can accept the views which are also true, may not be given in our particular tradition, but if they are true, we have to accept. It doesn't matter where these ideas are coming from. If other traditions are talking something good and right, we have to accept. We should not go against to them, or we should not think that what we have said that is only the truth and not others. So these are three cardinal principles which are really very fascinating and which are having potential to make the whole world one, and are capable to create a non-violent, peaceful, harmonious world order. Right. So these are the three things. Other things are very important. He said very what we say insightful philosophy about the cosmic order, about the life, about social things also. So that will take too much time to explain.
We'll be coming to that. Yeah, we'll be coming to
yes.
that. I think it was very important, a certain point that you raised, which is that of non-absolutism. Yes. We'll be having a discussion on that as part of the Infinity Foundation as well. And it is very interesting in the context of the emergence of Buddhism thereafter as well, and in the broader kind of dharmic fold, because be it ritualism, be it absolutism, be it certain aspects of practice that was happening at that point in time, I think it was there was a certain element of novelty, or at least the dogged kind of dedication towards these aspects, which was very important. And I think, as you mentioned, this does give a recipe for a more inclusive and pluralistic world, which is based on nonviolence and acceptance, essentially. Coming to you as a Samani or Jain nun, you were initiated on 18th April 1986 to spread the faith and to seek salvation through the rigorous practice of the Jain religion. My question to you would be, what made you embrace nunhood and undertake your journey within Jainism, or subsequently become an academic for Jain studies, both in India and the US?
Okay, so very good question. I am born in a Jain family. Right. My mother is very much religious, and he is very much into spirituality. So she wanted that all children should go on the path of spirituality. She used to tell us some religious stories. some religious stories and used to tell the moral that, see, to be spiritual is really to have a meaningful life, a purposeful life. So you guys can think of it. And that moral has inspired us to think about it. And in the age of 13, I have decided that I have to give up everything which is worldly and should go on the path of spirituality. So that is one motivation which I have got from my mother, especially from my family environment also. And we were also into religious practice from very childhood. So that all have supported to come on the path of spirituality. So far as the work in academic field is concerned, since I am very much interested in meditation and deep philosophical thinking, and that has given me opportunity to work in this field, academic field, so that I can always be in touch of some education, some knowledge, and can explore what is within me and what is my goal of life. So that was a very main cause that I wanted to work in the field of academics. And my gurus, they have also seen some talent in me, and they've given such opportunity to work in the field of academics. And I have been working from last 35 years. Since the time of my initiation, I am continuously working in some universities or some colleges in India and abroad. And I found that Jainism is really very, very spiritualistic tradition, very non-violent, very peaceful, and very insightful philosophy and religion. So I have to pursue it for benefit of myself, and also I have to promote it for the benefit of all humanity. Right. And that's why academic field is really very great opportunity or great platform where we can talk and the world can listen to us.
And I think that's a very important point as to the engine with which society kind of functions is obviously with respect to conceptualization of various ideas, ideals, principles in a more relevant, in a more practical sense as well. And academia does give that, the interface between the domain of, principles and ideals and values, as well as something which is more functionally useful for humanity and the way in which that can be utilized for that purpose. So that is a very important point. Coming to a slightly different subject within Jainism, and which has been looked at by yourself and Jain luminaries in the past, Jainism touches upon the origin of life, and you yourself have written on the subject vis-a-vis scientific theories today. Could you tell us a little about this?
Okay, yeah, it is good. See, according to Jainism, there are some realities which are fundamental, non-created, ever present, and eternal. And among them, soul is also there. Right. One of the 6 fundamental realities, one is soul. And life starts with the support of soul. If soul is there, then there is life. If soul is not there, then life cannot be expected in anything. So the main source of life is soul, and when soul comes into particular form of life, or then we recognize it that there is some life. Otherwise, we can't see the soul directly, because it is something non-physical, invisible, non-material, conscious entity. So I have said that life is always there on the earth. It was not the time when there was no such living being on the earth. The life is from all the times, and it is all the times on the earth in some way or other way, in some form or other form. Since the soul is eternal, so life is also in that sense found on the earth in all times. So that is one thing I wanted to say. And what you want to know about the life, what should I say next? Could you please clear so that I can
Yes. I also wanted to kind of contextualize that discussion in terms of the scientific theories today. So, be it in terms of the origin of the universe as well, there are various modern conceptions, which is a different question, which we can address and shall address, and also the idea of life itself as it has been looked at in the modern biological sense, be it in Darwinian formalism, be it in the various other aspects that we look at when it comes to life as we know it. So in that context, there are certain things which come across as interesting and slightly different from the conventional modern conception of it. So could you please tell us a little about that? For instance, you were mentioning about life having been there for a good amount of time, and there are also the eschatological or the mythological aspects or the religious aspects, where the dating of the times when certain things came up in Jainism as well, for instance, may not quite coincide with some of the aspects of modern scientific kind of thinking, essentially. So how does one kind of look at that, and how does one reconcile that?
Okay. So the Darwinian theory says that in the first, there was one cellular body, and from that body, with the course of time, this human life has emerged. So Jainism doesn't believe in such kind of theories. They say that the life is governed by the karmic principle, and it is quite individual. And it depends on the particular karmas of the living beings, that what kind of life they are going to take in particular time. So it is a karmic principle which is governing the life of all living beings. And it was not the time when there was just only amoebas or one cellular bodies and no other developed form of life were there, according to Jainism. Since Jainism believes that humans are the living beings or who are coming out of womb of some mother. Right. So unless there is some human being pre-existing, how human race can come out of it? Come out of the one cellular body. So that is not possible according to Jainism. Yes, there are certain species which take birth in particular time, since that time they are getting conducive environment for taking birth or for survival. Otherwise, they are not found in other time when their time is not favorable in their favor. So according to Jainism, some species can take birth in particular time and some other time they cannot be found, they can extinct, but it doesn't mean that life is not there or life was not there of any other living beings. Then only the amoebas was there in the starting. According to Jainism, human beings were also there, all other types of living beings were also there from the very beginning of the universe. And since the universe is eternal, it is going on from the time of immemorial. According to all Indian philosophical systems, the time is cyclic and at the same time it is eternal. So the same kind of cycle is going on. Right. And that's why all types of living beings are coming into existence, and they are also extinguishing with the time. So new civilization starts at particular time and reaches to the climax, and then starts falling down and comes to complete collapse in that sense. But it doesn't mean that there is no other living beings, then only the nature, completely nature, destroyed nature. But the some of the human beings are also there in the aid of the particular civilization, and the new civilization starts with them. So it is not that starting there were only amoebas or one cellular bodies, and out of that all other higher species have developed with course of time. That is not the theory. One amoeba cannot convert into the higher state because it has no such kind of karmic fruition in that particular life. So it cannot develop in that state. Yes, it can die and it can come back to new life in a higher spaces. So that is possible. But we cannot say that all human beings are coming after a long journey and starting from amoebas. So that is not the principle which Jainism believes.
But Samani ji, I mean, for instance, just a small, follow-up to this before we move on to the various dharmic kind of traditions that we have. And this is a question that I had, we discussed this previously as well. The whole idea of empirical findings, right? I mean, the way in which science has been working, for instance, in terms of backtracing, species and the way species have evolved and so on, is with, for instance, paleontology, and there are various fossils and remains that remain, and there is a very specific way in which we have been trying to track the universe's evolution as well. For instance, we try to see how distant stars are moving with respect to us and with respect to each other, and how they have been moving over time, essentially. So in that respect, the whole idea, and I get what you're trying to bring across, which is that the latent potentiality of something to become something else, and the causative manner in which it happens, the cause effect kind of that brings about that particular thing. But isn't, for instance, natural selection is something that Darwin had given us, and there is a certain way in which, even though there isn't a functionality of a certain organism, let's say in the beginning, it kind of evolves and adapts to a greater kind of functionality of sorts, right? So in this, with this empirical understanding as it stands today, how do we reconcile the Jain thought or the Jain formalism with this idea, with these ideas as such?
Yes, I agree to this point of natural selection. So science mostly talks about some natural laws or natural selection, but it is very difficult to know that what kind of natural selection and why this natural selection is.
Right.
Jainism is answering to this question, why some living beings are evolving and some are not.
Right.
What is that natural selection? What is the cause of natural selection? So according to Jainism, it is because of the karmic fruition, karmic result that some species are making some effort to evolve in the higher state. And they are selected by nature to come up in the higher state. So that can be a reconciling point between Darwin and Jainism.
Right.
So Jainism is answering to the question of natural selection. Why nature is selecting only few and not all?
Right. Right.
So it is because of their karmic principle or karmic law. They are coming out of some lower state to higher state.
Right. And I will follow up with the question on karma as well, because the way in which karma is looked at in the Hindu fold, the Hindu formalisms and the Jain formalism, there are some differences. And I guess the people in the scientific domain, I mean, the scientists as we stand here, will call this speculative, purely because probably the empirical backing or the mooring for such a argument is still kind of elusive in a certain way, and understandably so, because you mentioned in the past that these are not things that can be experimentally found, and that has always been the underlying kind of understanding of what the soul is, what the karmic level of existence is, and so there is a fundamental difference and dichotomy of sorts, and I will engage with that in a bit. I would like to kind of draw your attention to a slightly different area here, which is to do with the idea that conventional wisdom would say that Jainism differs from both Hinduism and Buddhism. And all three believe that there is, nothing permanent in the world we see around us. But while Buddhism says that there is no eternal self or soul, I mean, the whole idea of anatta, Hinduism speaks of an eternal, unchanging self and soul, in either be it in the Brahman kind of the Vedantin traditions, or even in the Sankhyan kind of, duality of Purusha, Prakriti, and so on, while Jainism incorporates an eternal but changing self and soul. So what are your thoughts on these ontological and philosophical similarities and differences of Jainism, Hinduism, and Buddhism? And how do you argue for the transience of the self itself, as mentioned in the Jain traditions?
Good. See, Jainism, Buddhism, and Hinduism have some philosophical debates on some particular metaphysical issues or realities.
Right.
So among them, one is that what is reality actually? Okay. What is the criteria of reality? So Buddhism believes that every reality is transitory. It is just for one moment. It is in flux. So this is the criteria of being a real. According to Hinduism, real is what is unchangeable in all the three times.
Right.
So that is real. Jainism stands or takes a different position. According to it, if we want to understand any reality, we have to accept this golden principle that every reality is dual in nature.
Right.
Every reality is dual in nature, and every reality stands in what we say in binary position. It means that it has also some counterpart outside.
Right.
So until and unless you take both the aspects together, you cannot fix what is real. So according to Jainism, every reality is transitory as well as permanent. And if we want to understand it in some detail, then we have to understand that if things are changing, so this change can be explained only when you are accepting something is abiding or permanent. Otherwise, you cannot say it is changed. It is new production then.
Right.
Okay. So change cannot be explained, and without change, the rebirth is not possible. Without change, the karma theory is not possible. So all these doctrines are accepted in Hinduism and Buddhism as well. The rebirth is accepted in Buddhism. The karma theory is accepted in Buddhism. Right. If something is not permanent, then who is carrying on this karmic baggages or residue? So that is a big question before Buddhism from Jainism side. So Jainism believes that everything is having dual nature. Pure permanent, pure transitory does not exist. Everything which is existing must have both the qualities permanence as well as impermanence. And that's why it is accepting that soul is also transitory as well as permanent. Soul as substantive reality is always there. But the particular mode of life is not permanent, it is transitory. And that's why death is accepted. That yes, I'm coming in this particular form of human life, but it will not be always. It cannot be permanent. It is for the time being. So this mode can be changed. So modes are changing. They are coming in succession. They are not permanent. But the substance is always permanent. Soul will always be soul, and it will always be there even after death. So substantive reality exists permanently, but its mode always changes. So at the level of mode, you can accept the death, you can accept the transitoriness of soul also, but not at the level of substance. So that is the view of Jainism about self.
Right. And I think you brought forth this paradoxical nature, which you kind of highlighted right now, which is that there is transience and there is permanence. I mean, in various traditions within Hinduism as well, and I think certain other, world religions, there has been an initial discussion. In fact, in the very early days, in the Rig Veda, for instance, there are some aspects, for instance, in the Nasadya Sukta, which talks about that which is beyond the binary. I mean, so if there is a binary, it is beyond that as well. And unfortunately or fortunately, it had kind of moved towards a place where that understanding kind of either got obfuscated or was looked over at various points in time. So I think Jainism does bring forth that very important aspect, which is that universe itself is paradoxical, and the transience and immanence are part of the same reality. So
one thing more I want to say, that Hinduism and Buddhism, somewhere they accept this kind of binary nature of reality or dual aspect of reality, but it is just in particular some reference. According to Jainism, everything is having dual nature and everything is in binary. Everything has its own opposite, and that applies to all from atom to space. Nothing is an exception of this particular golden principle. So it is not that the sky is eternal or unchanging, or soul is eternal and unchanging. That is not the principle of Jainism. This principle of permanence and impermanence, or you can say dual nature, applies to all realities. All realities.
Well, within the Vedic and Vedantic thought as well. Actually, I should have clarified. It is yes. Not selective kind of permanence and transience. Actually, just as you said in Jainism as well, it is that everything is infused with this paradoxical nature. I should highlight that. I have not studied all that much about Buddhist eschatology beyond a point and philosophy, but within Hinduism, at least to my limited knowledge, we have various strands within the Hindu fold. For instance, even in Ramakrishna's Vijnana Vedanta, which came up in the 19th century, he talks about the paradoxical kind of duality which is inherent in everything that we have around us, with a very famous kind of example of a staircase which takes you to the roof. And the staircase itself and the firmament being made of the same material and yet not as that of the roof and beyond, essentially. So there is this discussion of the binaries, the dualities, and the paradoxical nature. But what is more interesting in the Jain premise is that the idea, the preeminence of Anekantavad, which brings me to the next question. Anekantavad is arguably one of the fundamental Jain premises of reality and relativity. And simply put, it says that the ultimate truth and reality is complex and has multiple aspects. And according to Jainism, no single specific statement, model, framework can describe the nature of existence and the absolute truth. And this is very close to me and my way of thinking and writing as well. Recently, we will be having a video soon on one of the essays that I wrote on Turyavad, which looks at this aspect. So does this mean that every point of view is true? And how does one bring together views that may fundamentally contradict each other as per Jain thinking?
Very critical question. Mm-hmm. So yes, according to the principle or doctrine of Anekant, or you can say multiplicity of truth. Yeah. Every truth is having infinite aspects or dimensions, and everybody cannot see all the dimensions together. Yeah. They can see one or two or some, and not all. And that's why there is always a scope to explore something new, some new dimension of reality. And this is the reason that some religions, some philosophical traditions, they have seen some other aspects and not what is said or what is discussed in Jain tradition. Right. So that's why we say that, okay, these are also true things and we have to accept it. And that's why Jain philosophers and thinkers have tried their best to reconcile the Hindu views, the Buddhist views, even the views of science. Today, we are reconciling with Jain concepts because everything is not explored in one and the same tradition. So other traditions are also trying to explore the truth, and they are also talking about some aspects of realities, and that is also very good, and we have to accept. So this is one thing. The second question which you have raised is that how we can reconcile all the contradictory views. Jainism has talked about the principle of Shadvada, the doctrine of Shadvada. Shadvada means conditional dialects. Whenever you have to talk some contradictory aspects of reality, you have to talk always in a relative sense or in some conditional way. That from this point of view, I'm talking that the soul is eternal. And from that point of view, I'm talking that the soul is non-eternal or transitory. So if you are taking two different standpoints and saying something contradictory or controversial, that can also be accepted or reconciled in a right way. So, but most of the people or most of the philosophical systems or even the branches of science, they talk about the things and they say that, oh, it is this, but they don't refer to the particular context, in which context they are talking like this, okay? From which angle they are talking this thing, or from which perspective they are talking this thing. And that's why this missing of particular context or reference is creating cultural conflicts, or you can say cultural disputes, or debates, and one is accepting and other is rejecting, like that kind of things are going on from very long time. So since we have to make clear that from which angle I'm talking this thing, and then it is easily accepted. Yes, that is true. If Hinduism says that the truth is unchangeable, then they are talking from substantive point of view, and that is acceptable in Jainism. That substance is always eternal. It is unchangeable. It remains always as it is. And from moral point of view, if Buddhism talks about the reality that it is transitory, then it is also accepted in Jainism that yes, since the reality is changing at every moment, and that's why it is not same in the second moment. So you can talk of that kind of reality also. But that is also relative truth and not absolute or complete truth. Absolute means complete truth. So Jainism is in favor of complete or perfect truth, and which must be inclusive rather than exclusive in its approach. So that is the approach of Anika.
Right, and that's a very important point. However, I was very interested in knowing how, practically speaking, for instance, you mentioned about a very important point here, which is the contextualization is important, the context in which something is presented, and that inherently can give the resolution of a certain conflict or a binary or a point of difference. But many a times in various exclusivist or dogmatic frameworks, as it stands, be it in theology, philosophy, social kind of constructs, or even political kind of theories, there is a contextualized kind of binary which is presented. There is a certain polarization or exclusivism that is brought forth. And in that respect, it is not that people don't recognize it, but there is a natural alignment with the binary, one of the other of the binary. So from the Jain standpoint, I think this is a very important message. But I would like to know from you, in a practical sense, in today's world, how can we implement this better so that this kind of polarization and dogmatic kind of thinking is not prioritized?
Yes, so we should develop mutual understanding. We should have open-mindedness and try to see that why other is speaking in like this.
Right.
So try to understand their angles, their perspectives, their methods, even for exploring the truth, or their purpose. Sometimes the purpose also makes a difference in our opinions. If I'm looking for some spiritual enlightenment, and my perception would be different in that context, and you are looking for some material gains or material goals, then your perspective would be very different. Okay, so goals sometimes also makes differences in our perception to look at the reality. So we have to see that what kind of goal is there, what kind of method is there, what kind of perspective is there, in which reference he is talking. So we must have open-mindedness. Try to understand others, develop some mutual understanding, and then you will see that there is no such kind of disputes there. And this is what Jainism has presented. Jain scholars and philosophers have tried their best, and they could see the reality in other traditions and could live with them without any disputes, without any dialogues with them, or any kind of cultural conflicts with them. They are working. So it is because of the open-mindedness.
Very, very well put. And I think that's a very important point. And I hope that this interaction and the various works that Jain scholars have done and other luminaries in various traditions have done can bring that forth in practicality in our day-to-day life as well. Recently, a newspaper article headline read, "The Times Group Chairman, Hindu Jain attains Nirvana." Right? Terms such as Nirvana and Moksha are being rather frivolously used these days, right? Because there is a certain way in which it was conceptualized and has been kind of used within various frameworks, not kind of discounting on the attainments and the achievements of Miss Hindu Jain. But could you tell us a little about the Jain concept of nirvana and how the emancipation, the spiritual emancipation of the individual is attained, and the nuances of that, essentially?
Okay. So see, nirvana is a very pious word. Yes. And ultimate goal of human life, according to Jainism, each human being should make effort to achieve this goal of life. So whenever somebody dies, we would like to say that he has attended moksha, or he should or she should achieve moksha as soon as possible. So that is our just a good wishes to the past soul.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that she has reached moksha or liberation. Okay. So this is the way of speaking in a practical life, that we always think something higher for the past souls. So far as the concept of liberation is concerned, according to Jainism, one can liberate when one becomes free from all karmic bondages. So according to Jainism, there are karmic material or karmic particles which are keeping our soul intact into worldly state. So until and unless we break the karmic veil, and take our soul out of it, we cannot liberate. So we have to make effort to put the karmic baggages or residue to an end and make our soul free from it. So karmic freedom or salvation from karmic bondage is the liberation according to Jainism. And when you put the karmic baggages to an end, it means you are also putting the cycle of birth and death to an end. So you become always immortal. You will never return to take new birth, and there will not be even death. When there is no birth, no death. So you become immortal, and also you remain always in a very peaceful, blissful, eternal knowledge in the liberated state, and never comes back to this mundane world.
And I think that has been the preeminent kind of theme of the various dharmic traditions, the emancipation of the individual and the journey that we take thereof. And even in Jainism, I mean, well, with my mother's association, as I had mentioned to you previously, I think I have had a personal kind of connect of sorts with Jainism. And it has always fascinated me because I've seen at very close quarters some of the Jain sadhus and sadhvis who have, worked along the way in their journey towards, spiritual emancipation and their journey thereof. Within Jainism, what has always fascinated me, another aspect of it, is the various sects of Jainism. So you have the Shwetambar, the Digambar, you have Murti-Pujas and Sthanakvasis. So I would like to know from you, why did these divisions come to be in the first place within the larger Jain family?
Yes. See, we humans are always having some thinking ability, no?
Right.
And we always think and interpret things according to our own way. We try our best to understand whatever is written by the omniscience, by the religious authorities. And since at present there is no omniscient like Lord Mahavir or other Tirthankars. So when the Tirthankars were present on the earth, there was no division. The Tirthankars used to keep all types of different practices in one order or in one system. But after that, what happens? Some of the people or ascetic groups, they say that no, this kind of practice we have to continue, or other things that this kind of practice we have to continue. So because of this different practices, interest into different practices, there are certain divisions. But so far as the philosophical thinking is concerned, they all are unanimous. They believe in the same kind of principles and practices, but just their emphasis on some particular thing practically in practical life, and that's why they are differing in that way. So it is nothing. See, difference is also a kind of richness.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Shows that richness of thinking, that you have such people who could think in different way. Yes. And if that way is right, so why there is some question about the division. So division is good if they have no disputes, no enmities against to each other, then it's okay. We have to welcome, because everybody can think in different way and can follow religion in a different way. So all people cannot follow everything or anything in a one way. They have also their own interest. So because of that, we find such divisions.
I think the doctrinal, differences in perception, actually, I mean, that has been the theme in various, religions for that matter, even in Buddhism, the Sarvastivadins and the Shunyata,
yes.
And in Hinduism and Christianity for that matter. So it is the lack of the omniscience, as you rightly put, and the understanding of the import and essence of what was said. I think that creates the divisions. You have written in the past on Bhagawan Mahavir's scientific vision, and more contemporaneously, you have written about Acharya Mahapragyaji's theory of creation, which is Srishtivad, in Jain canonical literature. So could you tell us a little about this?
Okay. So theory of creation is actually given by the theological traditions who believe that God is creator of the universe. In that sense, Jainism doesn't believe that God or any other supreme being has created this universe. According to Jainism, universe is eternal, and it has no beginning and no end. So there is no question of creation and there is no question of creator. And I was reading the book Theory of Everything, which is written by Stephen Hawking. And in the end of that book, almost I found that he is also talking that there are certain theories which have been developed in the field of science to explain the beginning of the universe. Still, and they couldn't get on all answers. And looking at the difficulties in spite of developing all those theories, the scientist Stephen Hawking was thinking that it may be that the universe is eternal, and that's why there is no need of thinking of any creator God then. So he was also thinking in that light. Okay, so Jainism has said that the universe is eternal. It is not created, so there is no question of creation. There is no question of creator. But yes, how the universe is what we say constituted, or how it is there is diversity of living beings, there is so much differences in the universe. So we have to explain those diversities, the cause of diversities or differences or multiplicity of the elements of the universe. So Jainism has talked about the rules, the natural laws which are governing these all differences. And in that sense, I have talked about the creation, which is especially developed by Acharya Mahapragya, that yes, Jainism also believes in creationism, but in a very different manner.
Right.
It accepts that the fundamental realities are six and they are eternal, beginningless, non-created. But yes, out of their combination, we are getting these multifarious universe. Right. So how they are combining together and giving rise to different objects in the universe, how the diversities of living beings is being seen by us. So what is the karma principle, how it is playing role to develop or to come all different species into being, and how the different elements of the universe are coming into existence, how they are being created, and what are the principles which are working, or natural laws which are working behind all these multifarious world. So that I have discussed in my particular article. That is really the translation of the article written by Acharya Mahapragya. So it is a very, I can say that this creationism is a kind of a scientific explanation about the universe.
But when it comes to, again, going back to the idea that we were trying to explore in the biological and the origin of life question, and it's very interesting, just a side note here, that even in the Hindu traditions, there is the whole idea of permutations and combinations of the gunas, the qualities, and, the sattva, rajas, and tamas, and the way in which that brings about the various, diversity and multiplicity we see around us. So, it is not quite the same thing, but there is this whole idea of the permutations and a natural way in which those happen, and well, we see whatever we see around us. But my question is more to do with the empirical findings. So, for instance, Stephen Hawking, if I'm not mistaken, he mentioned that there isn't probably a theory of everything. There is, something which is, there could be various theories and models which work well together in certain regimes and conditions, and not so in a unified manner as we want to kind of, the holy grail of physics as such. Various other people have spoken about it. There are other scientists like Roger Penrose, who has mentioned about the cyclic cosmology model, which is to do with the whole idea that there's a big bang and the big crunch, big bang and big crunch, and so on. So now the question is that when we talk about this, the principles of the six, dravya, the substances, the realities rather, permuting and coming together, again, how do we reconcile that with what we see around us? Particularly to do with the idea that astronomically and cosmologically, we see a few things using, whatever technologies we have been able to develop. And how do we reconcile that with, what we see in those readings?
Okay. Whatever science is thinking about this Big Bang and Big Crunch, so I can say that according to Jainism, the whole time cycle is divided into two.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Ascending epoch, and the other one is called descending epoch. Right now we are running in a descending epoch. So it starts from the very developed state to a declined state. So I can say that the declined state can be considered as a Big Bang when new civilization starts. That is also the time which is very hot, and according to some natural laws, the universe starts again from that hot state to developed state. So that kind of, I can say that in the end of this particular ascending era, we got that everything is being declined naturally in its natural qualities. The human beings and other natural resources, they are also declining in their qualities. And there will be one point when everything will be collapsed. The present civilization will collapse, and the new civilization will start again. So that state will be quite hot situation in that moment, especially. So the civilization starts with the hot situation when the earth is completely hot and very ruined state. And from that, the civilization again starts in a new way. So it shows that, yes, such kind of Big Bang and Big Crunch comes periodically after a certain period, and new civilization starts after that.
And you mentioned about the six fundamental realities, and you also mentioned about karma in the past. So karma has been a preeminent idea and concept in Hindu traditions and in Jainism for that matter. In Hindu traditions, it has been mentioned in various texts, from the Rig Veda and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad to the Srimad Bhagavad Gita and the Purans. Jains believe that karma is a physical substance or a reality, if not a substance per se, that is everywhere in the universe. And there is also this idea that karma particles, or there are certain kind of particulate kind of formalism, where there are particles associated with karma that are attracted to the soul by actions of that soul. So as per Richard Francis Gombrich, for instance, karma is thought to be manifest as very subtle and sensually imperceptible particles pervading the entire universe. So what is the origin and rationale of this idea, if I may ask?
So it is good. The Richard you have mentioned might be. It is the name. Yeah. So he's completely talking in the sense of Jainism or Jain view about karma principle. Yes, Jainism says that since the soul is eternal and it is in contact or association with the karmic particles from the time immemorial because of its actions, because it is always active and engaged in some activities, whether mental, physical, or verbal. And because of that, it is continuously getting karmic particles or material from the environment, which is spread throughout this cosmic space. And this material is very fine, very fine. You cannot see it with naked eyes, or is the sophisticated yantras of today also cannot detect them. But this fine matter is always with soul, and it is governing its destiny in particular form of life.
Right.
So this is invisible, and yes, it is always with the soul. And some people ask that when this matter has started coming in the context of soul. So Jainism says that it is beginningless. There is no beginning. For example, you find gold in the mine. Gold in the mine. Yeah. And when you find the gold, you take out the gold from the mine, you find that it is not in pure state. It is always in impure state. It is always associated with some soil, or you can say some mitti in Hindi language. Okay. So if you want to trace out the beginning point when the soil came in the contact of the gold, you cannot trace out. Is it? Yeah. Similarly, these elements, soul and karma principle, have association with each other from the time immemorial. And I say that practically, if you want to be convinced by this logic, convinced about this logic, then you have to see that in this nature, there is nothing in pure state. Everything is mixed with some other elements. So the soul is mixed with karmic matter, and all other elements which you find in the soil or in the mines, they are also mixed with some other elements. So that this is the what we say universal principle which applies to all realities which are natural, and in nature they are always mixed with some other elements, and you have to take some refinery process to make them pure. So similarly, religion is a kind of refinery process which helps to pure the inner self and separates from the karmic material and make it free, and help to realize its own divine potentials.
Right. And I think it's very interesting because even within Vedantin and various other, even Gnosticism, which is a very early form of in the Judaistic traditions and so on, there is a whole duality and the whole idea of veil of ignorance, essentially. They take it in a slightly different way. I mean, how the causative actions happen, the karmic actions happen, and what makes the original essence of a man or a person kind of clouded, as you say. And this is a very interesting, different and distinct formalism as such. I had a query regarding the substance and the way in which we perceive the soul. So you mentioned that these particles or particulate, entities kind of attached to the soul. But in the very beginning, the way we perceive of the soul in these traditions, we look at it, is kind of not empirical. It does not have an expansion. It does not have any matter-related aspect whatsoever. So the idea that this particulate nature of it, even though it may be, very, very small to see or imperceptible, as Brahmaj says, but it still has a finite expansion. It still is, in a certain way, empirical, so to say, or at least has the possibility of being empirical. So how do we reconcile these two things? Because in Vedanta, for instance, they mention that Maya, the Brahman and Maya duality, there is no play in the world that we see around us. I mean, we see the products of that interplay of sorts, but the level is much more fundamental in a certain way. So why did we go with the particulate idea essentially in the first place, and how do we reconcile these thought processes?
Okay. Might be I'm getting your point, or so just I want to say that soul, generally Vedanta says that there is no expansion in soul, no?
Right, yes, there's no expansion in the soul.
Okay. Yes. But according to Jainism, the soul can spread throughout the universe. This much expansion the soul has.
By expansion, do you mean that there is a finite expansion, or just the all-permeating kind of, reality, which even Vedanta kind of mentions about, and other Hindu traditions as well? Because...
Okay.
Sorry.
So according to Jainism, the soul is of cosmic space size. Okay. Right. And that's why in certain condition, it can spread throughout the space, cosmic space, not out of cosmic space. Okay. So it has a expansion of the size of cosmic space. Entire universe, it can spread throughout the space, cosmic space or entire universe. So that kind of expansion it has already. It is consisting of innumerable soul points or consciousness points. Okay. So it has such kind of expansion, and that's why the karmic material can be attached to it, and it can be affected by those particles.
Right. Very interesting.
Okay? So that expansion is not material, the expansion of like material object, but it is a kind of spiritual or non-material entity. But it has also expansion, and that's why in Jain philosophy, the particular word is used for soul, that is jivastikaya. So jivastikaya means the soul has expansion, and it can expand throughout the universe, but not all the times. In particular time, it can expand. Otherwise, it is always limited to the body size. Whatever body it has, it is confined to that size only.
So, I mean, you mentioned about Jivastikaya, and so there is another aspect, which is Pudgalastikaya, which is in Jain philosophy, Pudgala or Pudgalastikaya is one of the fundamental aspects of reality, and best defined as all things that are continuously changing by the process of supplementation or disintegration, namely matter, essentially, matter more or less. And you've explored this aspect of reality extensively in the past, and I had the privilege of reading a few of those works, and specifically writing for modification, laws, expanse, mutation, motion of the Pudgal as well. So could you tell us a little about that?
Okay. So the Jivastika stands for the living entities. All types of living entities come under the Jivastikaya. Similarly, all kind of material elements or energies, they come under one term, that is Pudgalastikaya.
Yes.
So yes, Pudgala means matter or material energy, and it has expansion that is quite clear to the people of science also. So far as the matter is concerned, it has two forms. One is atom, which is indivisible unit of any material entity. So that is the last finest part of a material entity. And the other is more aggregates, you can say, or compounds or compositions, you can say. Okay. So matter exists always in these two forms. And there are certain rules for making composition or compounds or aggregates. How the atoms, which are free and separate or indivisible, how they come in the contact of other atoms and make molecules, and the small molecules make bigger molecules, and by adding other molecules, they give rise to the bigger entities or bigger elements. So there are certain rules behind it. We can explain. I can explain those rules, but right now we have no sufficient time to explain or to go into all details. So far as the speed, luminous speed is the fastest speed of atom is concerned, according to Jainism, atom has the fastest speed. Okay. And also the soul has the fastest speed, which is quite unimaginable today, because we are thinking that the electricity has the fastest speed right now at present, whatever speed is known or speed measurements are used. So in those measurements, light is accepted as the fastest element. Okay. But according to Jainism, in one movement only, not only 1 second or 1 nanosecond, in one movement only, the atom can go from one corner to opposite another corner. Similarly, the soul can go from one corner to opposite another corner in one moment. Right. And what is one moment according to Jainism? It is the last indivisible unit of time. Right. That is one fraction, okay, of time. So very smallest time, very last unit of time in which the soul can travel from one corner to another, the atom can travel from one corner to another. And this fastest speed takes place when the soul or atom do not touch the space. If
Right.
it touches space, then it may take more time to reach from one corner to another. So this fastest speed is possible only when they do not touch the space.
Right.
Okay, so that is called Afusman Gati. That is called Afusman Gati. Without touching the space, this speed is going on.
Right.
Or this is the fastest speed which is accepted in Jainism.
Right. So you mentioned about the theory of atomism and Afusam-gati, and also you mentioned about various other aspects. So for instance, you speak about the 4 types of atoms. You speak about the principle of uncertainty, the dual nature of atom as well. And it's interesting because, well, when the Jain traditions were, initially kind of, at least Bhagawan Mahavir and thereafter, there was also the Vaisheshikas, for instance, Kannan, the very eminent seer essentially, who gave us the atomic theory as well. Now, the question is that science, modern science as we know it, there are 2 different strands which I would like to kind of explore with you here, which is that you mentioned about jumping through space without jumping through to different points without going through space. Now, this is something which in the quantum domain, right, in the quantum physical domain, for instance, we see that information, not quite practical physical matter, can pass at superluminal or at least instantaneous kind of situation. So it is possible that information can go through, but nothing physical can kind of cross the speed of light. So a possible kind of conjecture which people have had is that whether the soul is actually an information dynamics or the meta dynamics of sorts of entities, and therefore we can kind of reconcile all that we know in science with the idea of the soul. And the second question is that modern science has moved away from or other point is that modern science has moved away from the atomistic view. Now we talk about the quantum fields, we talk about strings in string theory and so on. So again, how do we kind of approach this reconciliation that needs to be done between what modern science says and what we have from Jainism, for instance?
Okay. So far as the first question is concerned, the soul is completely conscious element. Okay, it's every iota is full of infinite consciousness, and it doesn't need any physical support to communicate with anybody. Okay, so it has when it is said in Jainism that whatever knowledge emerges in one iota of the soul, the same knowledge you will find in other iotas of the same soul. Okay, so it means that all information is spread throughout the whole soul and not in particular part. So you can find the same information in other iotas of the soul, what you are looking into one. So this is one answer. Second is that yes, according to Jainism, there is one scripture which is known as Anuyogdvar in Jain tradition. And in this particular text, the author has discussed about the method of reading the Jain scriptures, how you should read and understand or interpret each word or each sentence of the Jain scriptures. So that method has been discussed in particular scripture, and which is known as Anuyogdvara. In that particular text, the author is talking about 2 types of atoms. Okay. One is called a real atom and other one is called a practical atom. Right. So what we are perceiving when we listen to these theories of science, we are finding that they are talking about the practical atom, which can be split into further smaller parts. Because it is not really atom, it is also a molecule, but it looks like atom. Right. So you can split into not only in 200 subparticles, but you can divide it into infinite number of particles even, according to Jainism. Right. Okay, so these practical atoms, they look like atom or indivisible or very smallest part of physical or material entity. But they are also a kind of molecules which are so small, like the last unit of the atom, which is real atom. Right. And the real atom is indivisible. It cannot be further divided or splitted into any subparticles. So what we are perceiving, that science is still talking about the practical atom, and that can be splitted. And that's why they are thinking that atomism theory doesn't work today, what is discussed in philosophical systems or philosophical domain. But according to Jainism, they are still talking about the atom or practical atom or practical particle, which can be further divided.
Very interesting, right? So
yes.
I mean,
but the real one cannot be splitted. Right. It is the last minutest unit of material entity, which has no scope for further division.
Right. Very, very interesting. And so going beyond that, I mean, when you talk about consciousness and soul, for instance, you've written about that in your works, and you have mentioned about, you have had deliberations on what you call functional consciousness. You've spoken about vitalities and biopotentials as well. Now, the thing is, for a scientist today, many of these concepts can be speculative, outlandish. If not, some of them can be very skeptical and cynical and regarded as blasphemous as well. So could you tell us a little about how you bring together the Jain school of consciousness and vitalism with the knowledge we have in terms of the idea that this whole idea of vitalism in energy is not something that we have at least formulated or seen essentially in empirical findings. And it is something which is still beyond the reach of our current experimentation and frameworks as such. So the whole idea of vitalism, which is very important, and consciousness with what we know as it stands, how do you kind of reconcile and bring them together?
Very good question. See, according to Jainism, each mundane soul is always associated with two subtle bodies. Okay. One is a Tejas body, which is, you can say, luminous body, or bioelectric body, which is always associated with mundane soul. And there is karmic body, which is the causal body. Okay. So these two bodies are always connected with mundane soul. So whenever soul takes new birth, it is having the bioelectricity with it. And that bioelectricity works through physical body and makes it functional in all states. So if suppose you are perceiving with eyes, but eyes are blinking, closing, okay, or perceiving. So all these functions which are taking place at physical level, they are being supported or empowered by this bioelectric energy which is flowing in the body. And that body is always associated with the soul, and soul has consciousness. So when we have to see something, when we want to close our eyes and want to take rest, so all decisions are being taken by consciousness. But whenever it takes a decision that I have to see this thing, or I have to speak some words, or I have to give interview, so this kind of decisions are made by consciousness, but these functions are taking place with the support of bioelectric energies, which is flowing inside the physical body. And that's why our mouth is functioning, and I'm uttering some words. So all these things are taking place with the support of some energy which is flowing inside. That is called the vitalities. And there are some biopotentials. So biopotentials, according to Jainism, whenever somebody takes new birth, it needs some physical powers to work or to interact with the external world, or to fulfill its basic necessities of in that particular life. So I can say that we need some physical systems in our body so that we can eat, we can breathe. So respiratory system, digestive system, blood circulation system, or excretory system. So all these systems are essential for all living beings from very first moment of birth. And these are called biopotentials in Jainism. So today the science talks in the sense of physical systems, and it accepts 10 types of systems. And Jainism talks about 6 types of systems which are essential for living being to survive in particular form of life.
Right. And so from vitalism to intentionality, which is something you've looked at as well. And there was this one writing and piece essentially where you drew a rather fascinating parallel between Jainism and Jean-Paul Sartre, who happens to be very famous or infamous in terms of declining the Nobel Prize, as I was reading a few days back in 1964, because he didn't want to be institutionalized. So you draw this parallel between Jainism and Jean-Paul Sartre in the light of the similarities and differences regarding intentionality, right? So could you tell us a little about that?
Okay, so right now I had what is written, I couldn't see actually. So I'm not just remembering the exact point. But according to Jainism, yes, intentionality is there, but somehow it is a kind of decision which is taken by our own inner consciousness. Right. And sometimes it is also affected by some external environment or situations. But right now I'm unable to answer actually to your question. So it will be better to drop this question, okay, right now. Thank you. I will see it another time and discuss about
Sure. Yes. A couple of questions, the last few questions are very important, actually. One of them being that on, being lacto-vegetarian is a part of practicing non-violence in the daily life of Jains. And, strict Jains exclude, for instance, various vegetables, potatoes, and other root vegetables from the diet. Quite a few Jains restrict their window of eating and drinking to daylight only, so that, there's no accidental ingestion of life forms, essentially, that are snuck into the food. So how do you see these practices feeding into a practical, modern, and transnational movement towards vegetarianism, if not lacto-vegetarianism as such?
Okay, so see, Jainism is talking from the point of view of non-violence and spirituality. Okay, right. But the modern or transnationalism, transnational vegetarianism is not thinking from that point of view. Okay. And that's why they are not going to that extent to which right. the Jains are practicing. Okay, so they are just trying to take a vegetarian diet to avoid such kind of viruses which are coming through a non-veg diet, right. or from a health purpose. Mm-hmm. So their goal is physical health, physical fitness, or you can say to be free from the effect of such kind of viruses. But they are not thinking from a spiritual or non-violence point of view, and that's why they are not practicing or avoiding these root vegetables in their diet. So that is also a kind of a thing which they are accepting, or they are coming to a vegetarian diet. That is enough, I think. Mm-hmm. And slowly and gradually they will understand the main concept of non-violence and also spirituality behind all these Jain practices, and might be they will also think of it. So we are just positive that at least they are avoiding non-veg. That is also very good thing, and coming to vegetarianism. But slowly and gradually they have to understand why Jains are practicing this vegetarianism from centuries, because of non-violence and spirituality.
And that is the important thing, the space from which one does a certain thing, essentially. The result or the policy can be the same, essentially, but the cause, the essence of what one is doing, that is important as such. You touched upon this idea of non-materialism and the non-attachment, rather, to certain materialistic aspects of life. And recently, President Ramnath Kovind said Bhagawan Mahavir gave special importance to aparigraha, that is not taking what is more than essential to live. And he said, and I quote, humankind is exploiting nature indiscriminately. Ruthless consumption and accumulation of resources is increasing. Due to this, phenomena like climate change are emerging as challenges. Following the Jain tradition shows us a way out of that, unquote. So how do you see us battling, this an increasingly capitalistic, materialistic, capitalism is not a problem in itself, possibly, but the materialism, essentially, the decadence and materialism that we see, that way of life in the contemporary world, how do you see us battling that, with the Jain thinking as it stands?
Yes, so it is quite necessary to understand spirituality.
Right.
Spirituality, our life is not just for material goals. Mm-hmm. We have some spiritual goals also. Yes. So first thing, if this can come to the mind of the people, then they can be very much limited in using the material things or keeping possessions. Okay, so this one thing. Second, we have to see that if we have to survive on the earth, we have to take care of the natural resources also. We have to give importance to their life. we have to be very much restricted in using these natural resources. So the climate change, global warming, viruses, all these are coming because of our luxurious way of living, material way of living. We are more focused on the material goal, material comforts, material pleasures, and not thinking about our own spiritual growth and also the preservation of nature. So at least we want to live with peace and health, and also we need the support of nature for that. So we have to think from ecological point of view. At least if we can't think about from a spiritual point of view, we have to think that if we have to survive on the earth, we need all these natural resources. We might have a lot of money or wealth. You can see thousands of people have lost their life in this pandemic. Yes. They might have all the material comforts, pleasures, wealth, etc., but they could not get a certain amount of oxygen, and because of that they have lost their life. So you can see the nature is how much the nature is important in comparison to your material growth and all wealth. They are at one side, and just for some amount of oxygen you are losing your life, no? So nature is more important than the material growth or material pleasures. And if you want to survive, then also you need these natural resources in a balanced state. And in the Acharam Sutra, that is the first scripture of Jainism, and in that particular scripture, Mahavir speaks that please be careful of natural resources, earth, water, fire, air, and vegetables or plants. They are very necessary for your survival. If you are violating nature, you are not only violating their life or the life which is dependent on them, but you are also creating a threat to your own existence. He's talking in the language. It means if you are ignoring the life of these poor beings, you are ignoring your own life. And that is being proven today. Okay. So that's why from ecological point of view, we have to start thinking about using the nature, how much we have to use and how much we should not.
Absolutely. And I think the unfortunate, repercussions of COVID and the pandemic that we've seen has given us context, has given us a certain idea of the transience of certain aspects of life and how ecology is so important to us, as you rightly mentioned. And we must kind of take the lessons or the understanding, the insight that we have got from that process of reflection of, introspection as such. Before closing, Samani, I would like you to, tell our viewers if you have any thoughts that you would like to share in terms of a closing statement, in terms of, what you feel we, coming from a Jain perspective, can take forward in today's world for the betterment of humanity.
Okay. So it is a quite, enlightening interview. And you have already asked so many things, and I have discussed many things in the light of all your questions. I want to say that balance is the prime principle of life. Balance. And we are not just a physical body, but we are having a very divine self inside. So our life must be balanced in the sense that we should be material to some extent, but at the same time we have to be very much intact of our inner divine self and try to listen to it, what it says, and try to follow what it says. So that is the thing I would like to say to the world, that they are material, but they should also have some spiritual insight in them. And they should try to live a balanced life rather than thinking of just one side and overlooking the other side. If this balance can be created in our philosophical discussion, scientific explorations, day-to-day life, then I think the whole world can be very non-violent, peaceful, harmonious, prosperous, and what we are looking for to live a better life.
Yes, beautifully put.
So thank you very much.
And I think it's so many aspects and dimensions that we discussed today, be it the multifacetedness of reality, how reality inherently kind of is a certain way where we should not have the dogmatic or parochial way of thinking. The whole idea of binaries and polarization is something which is inherently against what is the nature of reality as such. We discussed about nonviolence. We discussed about various social, political, and economic aspects of things that we see around us, and the Jain way of thinking thereby. So I would like to really thank you for your enlightening words that you have shared and the insight that you have shared. And we hope that this interaction will give a lot for the viewers to think about and to take forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's